ever since Stuart played at my birthday party. Okay, yeah, round and round, they'll have to come up. Okay, so our great keynote speaker and friend of mine, Jamie Notter. So Jamie is a founding partner at WorkXO, where he helps leaders drive growth through culture alignment. He brings 25 years of experience in conflict resolution, generational differences, leadership, and culture change to his work at WorkXO, which is a startup that helps organizations map their workplace genome and turn their workplace culture into tangible business tools that drives growth. I mean, who doesn't need that? Also, Jamie is an author of 2 great books out there, When Millennials Take Over and Humanize. Jamie has a master's in conflict resolution from George Mason and a certificate in OD from Georgetown, where he serves as adjunct faculty. And also, Jamie is a Jiffy popcorn connoisseur. So I invite Jamie up here to have a keynote on creating a culture of innovation. So Jamie, come on up here.
Thank you. I'm not going to tell you about the competition that was created last night about who could mention Jiffy Pop first.
I win.
Clearly I lost that battle. I had it all planned too. You totally ruined it for me. Okay. We're going to talk about culture and innovation today. Now I know Kevin and Sherry well enough to make an assumption about the group, both here and online. I'm assuming that if you're coming to one of their events, that you might be kind of on my side when it comes to the topic of culture and innovation. Like you probably, we haven't defined it yet, I'm going to get into that in a minute, but you probably think culture and innovation, a culture of innovation is a good thing. Who thinks it's a good thing? Who think we should probably be going in this direction? I got lots of hands. Online, raise your hands. I can't see them, but I'm trusting your rating. Okay. I expect that a lot of people say, oh yeah, culture of innovation, we need this. Anyone bold enough out there to say in front of everybody that they have a culture of innovation? Again, we'll define it, but if we haven't defined it yet, so you got some room here. Anyone like to say, yep, we've got a culture of innovation at our place? I got 1 hand, 2 hands. Technology companies, put your hands down. Just association. I love you guys, but you'll have something to learn here too. See, I got no hands. Online, maybe there were a few hands. I'm not surprised by that, and I will say I am a little bit concerned. I think this is... Innovation in the association space is something we really need to pay attention to, and I don't think we are. I think we're giving it some lip service, but I don't think we're doing enough about it. And here's a little bit of evidence. So Kevin mentioned When Millennials Take Over and Humanize. Some of you who've been around long enough may remember that I was involved in another book that is older. It came out in 2006. And the title of the book is We Have Always Done It That Way. 101 Things About Associations We Must Change. Anybody if you don't, anyone ever read the book? Like, no, we got a fan. Okay. This is a really quick book that 4 association consultants plus myself wrote back in 2005. We wrote it on a blog, which in 2005 was all crazy. That was innovative. People still called it a blog back then. Like, what's a blog? Like, it's a blog. Anyway, we wrote the book on a blog. And so it's basically 100 blog posts that said, hey, here's some associations, here's a bunch of stuff that you got to stop using that we've always done it that way excuse. You got to do something like, hey, and this is 2005, hey, social media, it's not a fad, okay? You got to embrace social media. That was one of the things we wrote about. Hey, strategic planning, maybe we need to do that a little differently. Having boards of all white men, maybe we should try changing that. Like, we were trying to identify some stuff back in 10, 12 years ago that says, hey, let's do some stuff differently. Now, this was 11 years ago now. And actually, last summer, when it was the 10th anniversary, I pulled the book out. And I said, all right, we had 101 things in here. It's been 10 years. We gave you all 10 years to make some change with some pretty simple recommendations. And I looked at each one, and granted, it's subjective, it was me. I gave a pass or fail. Like, has the association community handled this one or not? And I went through all 101. For instance, I'm going to give you guys a pass on social media. Okay? Like, okay, you did it. You're doing social media, some better than others, whatever, but like you've done that. You're still not saying, oh, I don't think we should do social media. It might be, what if someone says something negative? Like, no, we're mostly past that. So I give you that one. Anyone have a guess about how many of the 101 I gave you a pass on, that you've actually done the change? How many? 23? Lower. 10? Lower. 7. 7 out of 101, good job. 94 out of 101, still working on it. Now granted, you only had 10 years. So the 94, I think you guys will be done in about 165 years from now. You will have accomplished that. That is the pace of innovation in the association community, and that is a problem. You are not going to be here 165 years from now, maybe even 15 or 20 years from now, if you are content with that level of change. That level of saying, hey, I'm going to adapt to something new. All right, we got to speed this up. So, we need to be better at innovation. I'm suggesting that one of the main reasons that we're not good at innovation, that we're not doing it well, I hear a lot of excuses like, oh, we don't have the resources. I hear a lot about boards are holding us back. Oh, the boards don't get it. Like, I know that's an issue. But I would argue that your number one challenge is culture. You have the ideas, you know what to do, you're ready to go, but your culture, your workplace culture, your organizational culture will not let you do the innovation. And so you declare that you're going to do it, and then 6 months later, you're like, how come that never happened? It's because your culture was not in the position that would allow you to do the innovation you need to. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what it takes to build a culture of innovation. And to do that, we need to do some defining, because both the words culture and the words innovation get thrown around a lot, and I don't think people sort of give them definitions. And I often get pushback like, oh, they're really complex terms. I don't know if we can define them. No, you can define them. I'm going to give you definitions that fit on one slide. We'll start with innovation, because I think this is actually easier. This is my definition of innovation. There's a million definitions of innovation. I'm not claiming this is the best one ever, but it's resonated with me. I love this one because I now find it on Twitter like all the time. Like random people like in Romania are tweeting this with my name. I'm like, how did you know about this? Anyway, the easiest definition I can come up with is innovation is change that unlocks new value. Okay, because I've heard people tell me, oh, innovation is just change. No. If you run a conference and you still have a printed brochure, I'm not judging you on that, it's fine if you do, and you change the color, if last year it was blue and this year you change it to green, that's a change. That is not innovation. Are you with me on this one? And that change might even generate value. I don't know why this would happen, but if you change from blue to green and your registrations go up, congratulations, you got value from that change. So it's not just like change that generates value as innovation either, because it's not innovation. You changed around the edges. Innovation has to unlock value. Innovation has to, you have to be in a situation where there's value and it's behind this door and you can't get at it unless you change something pretty deep about how you're doing things. Not around the edges. Around the edges isn't going to unlock the value. You got to change something deeper, something bigger, something more fundamental to what you're doing in order to get that value that's sitting on the other side of that door. Right? So the sort of classic innovation story is around Uber, right? Uber did not go out and say, I'm going to create a whole new transportation company that's going to be awesome. We're going to buy cars, we're going to do our marketing differently. Like, that's all within the realm of what you would do if you had a transportation company. They didn't do that. They unlocked an incredible amount of value that was just sitting there in our personal vehicles and our personal drivers. And they had to innovate. They had to bring in an app. They had to rely on the internet and GPS and all sorts of other things to happen as well before they could make this happen. But it was sitting there, and they did the innovation work to unlock the value and get a hold of it. All right. So when I'm talking about a culture of innovation, I want a culture in your association. This applies to tech companies too, by the way. But I want a culture in your organization that is willing to do that work, that is willing to unlock new value, to find it and do what it takes to get to the other side where the value is. And I would argue that that is not common in the association community. Associations tend to say, my goal is to increase our numbers by 2%. Like, that's it. Like, if I can do that, I win. That is not unlocking new value. All right, so to unlock new value, you got to build this into your culture. And culture, this is where I get a lot of pushback from people. They're like, oh, well, culture is really hard to define. It's kind of squishy. It's vague. And again, I don't tolerate that. I can fit my culture definition onto one slide. Culture is the collection of words, actions, thoughts, and forgive the technical term, stuff that clarify and reinforces what is truly valued inside an organization. That's it. That's what your culture is. So if you want to see your culture, if you want to look at it, define it, it's the words, actions, thoughts, and stuff. That's where it exists. Okay? So it starts with words. Your culture, part of what your culture is what you say it is. So please choose your words carefully. Anyone ever been involved in hiring somebody, doing the interviews? Yeah, and you're, okay, so you're doing the interviews. Inevitably, you're going to turn it over to the candidate, and you're like, hey, so do you have any questions for us? And almost inevitably, they're going to be like, yeah, what's the culture like here? What is your answer? Or what is your hiring manager's answer? Or what is your CEO's answer? Or whoever. Like, what kind of answers do you give to that question? Is it like, our culture is great. Yeah, it's, we're like a family, pretty much. We have fun. It's like, I get those kind of answers around culture. By the way, this is an aside. This is what gets me over time as I tell these stories a little bit. If you describe your culture as we are a family, do you realize that in the English language, the #1 word that gets associated with the word family is dysfunctional? A lot of people are coming to work to leave their family for a month. So I'm putting that out there. Just be careful what you say. So the words matter, and I would rather you not say, it's great, we have fun, we're high performing, like all these sort of platitudes. I'd rather you say stuff like, we are so focused on innovation here, I hope you're ready for that. Like, hey, you know what? We really take collaboration seriously. I know everyone says they collaborate, but if you are not working with people to get work done, you are not going to be successful here. So if you'd like to be off in a corner by yourself, that might be a problem. Like, I want real clarity. What is our culture? What's valued here? What works? So choose the words carefully. Now, I start with words because I think that tends to be how we start with culture. But what speaks louder than words? Actions speak louder than words. So you've got your words that describe your culture. Please be careful to create an organization where the actual behavior inside your organization matches the words you're using. Okay? Because if there's a conflict between the words and the actions win. Okay? So if you tell me, so I'm in the job interview and I say, what's your culture like? And they're like, we are all about empowerment in this culture. This is a culture where we hire smart people and we want to let them loose and get work done. So you get to make decisions. You get to drive things. This is really important to us. I'm like, yes, that's exactly where I want to work. This is awesome. And I show up and then you've just told all your new recruits that this is what the culture is. And then you're walking down the hall and you stop your direct report and you're like, hey, how's that project that we were working on last week? And their answer is, oh, it's gone. It's out. It's shipped. It's live on the website. The members have it. Whatever. Like it's gone. We're done. If your immediate reaction is, ooh, did I get to see that before it went out? Did someone approve that? That behavior completely erases that lovely lecture you gave about how this is a culture of empowerment. It is not a culture of empowerment. It is a culture of get it approved before it goes out. Your behavior says that. And so the next time you're walking down the hall and you see the direct report and you're like, hey, how's that project? She's going to say, it's on your desk waiting for your approval. It's in your email. And you've lost the speed that you thought you had with that culture of empowerment. You've lost the engagement that you thought you had with people who loved that. Because you didn't get that your behaviors were inconsistent from the words. So words and actions, and then thoughts gets a little deeper. This is about underlying assumptions, mental models you have about how humans are and about how work is. These are things that are often not said explicitly, but they can muck up culture if you're not careful. So sometimes when you're looking at your culture, you got to get down to the level of assumptions. My favorite one on this is I was working with a management team, and when we were talking about their culture, they're like, we are I don't remember exactly how they said it, but We're a results-oriented culture. We're all about results. You get your results, I don't care how you get them, but that's what we're measuring, that's what we're focused on, we want you to do that. So I'm like, so it doesn't really matter when you show up, right, for work. Like you can show up at 10, you can leave at 3, you can work at home, as long as you're getting your job done, as long as you got your results, you're good. They're like, absolutely. We love our culture, it's all about results. And then I swear 2 weeks later, I was in their office, and the senior managers were coming into a meeting, and they're like, oh, did you see when Bob got into work today? Like 10 o'clock? Seriously? Like, wait a minute. You told me that you're all about results. But you still have that, if you're not at your desk, you're not working. Like that's an underlying assumption that these managers had that they weren't even aware that they had. Because they believed they were all about results, but they weren't challenging their own assumptions, which is, you know what, if I can't see you, you're not working. If you're not putting in long hours, you're not doing enough. A lot of us have assumptions like that. We got to raise them up and see if they're consistent with our culture. And then the last piece, so words, actions, and thoughts, that's what we do as human beings. That's the human part of your culture. There is the non-human part of your culture, which is the stuff part. Anything that's tangible in your organization that you can touch, that you can look at, that drives your culture. So your office space, how it is designed, how it is decorated, where it is located. Are you in downtown or are you in the suburbs? All of those things will actually clarify and reinforce what's valued. And so that can have a big impact on your culture. Even one of my favorite stuff part or tangible parts of culture is dress code. Right? Do you guys have dress codes? Yes? Some? Okay. That really reinforces what's valued. You guys know Mark Anderson, American Society of Surgery of the Hand? He's in Chicago, so he's not here today. But he's so proud of this, I've seen him present on it, and I've talked to him about it in his office, but he loves the fact that his dress code in his organization is 2 words. Anybody know what it is? Get dressed is close. It's sort of the flip side. It's good guess. No nudity. That is their dress code. That is in their policy manual. Their dress code is no nudity. They are very strict. You may not show up to work naked. If you show up to work naked, you have violated their policies. But if you are dressed, if you got dressed, then you're good. I was there doing research in his company, and he pulls this guy aside. He says, "Jamie, I want you to guess the title of this person." And the guy is wearing shorts, sandals, and a Blackhawks jersey. Okay, and I'm like, oh, Mark, I'm not playing the game. Just tell me what it says. He's our director of finance. Like he's excited about that. Now, in his culture, you don't have to have a culture like his, but in his culture, they really, really value authenticity. They want people to be their whole selves all the time. They think that makes them more successful. So because they value that, they can't choose a dress code that makes everyone look the same. It's not consistent. And so that's a stuff example of culture, and you need to choose these things wisely. And then the other piece that I want to reinforce around this part of the definition of culture is the part that's in green, which is valued. All of this stuff, words, actions, thoughts, and stuff, they're designed to clarify and reinforce what is truly valued inside your organization. And I intentionally use the word valued with a D and not values with an S, because I don't want you going down the route of core values. Who's got core values in their association? Who loved, honest truth, who's like, I love our core values. All right, no, so I'm getting you core values. Wait, let me guess what they are, too. Integrity, honesty, collaboration, quality maybe, not so much in the association space. If I can, sorry, what's a manufacturing thing? So if I guess your core values, I'm wondering how unique they are. But the problem is, you know who had really great core values? They're up on the wall, including the core values of integrity and honesty. Anybody? Enron. Enron had great core values. They were on the wall, integrity and honesty. But you and I both know that's not what was really valued there. What was valued at Enron was making your numbers, even if you have to make a large accounting firm lie about it. Okay? Now, I don't know what they did. I didn't work there. I didn't do any research. I don't know what words, actions, thoughts, and stuff they did to clarify to people, folks, here's the deal. Make your numbers no matter what. But they made that clear. So I love, theoretically, core values, and I think there is some value in articulating them. But you can't stop there. You've got to get down to the level of what's really valued. What do we really value here? What's important, what's not important? Where do we put our resources? Where do we put our attention? What do we hire people and fire people for? Don't tell me you value one thing and then let someone flaunt that value and then still have them work there. Right? You've got to be really clear. So culture, the work of culture becomes clarifying that and aligning that with what drives success. And that requires you to do a little bit more work than I think most associations do on their culture. You have to define it more clearly. So I designed, with my two business partners, a model to help you do this. We call it the workplace genome. We like the metaphor of getting to the genetic building blocks of your culture. But if you want, so there is no one perfect culture out there. I'm not here to tell you what your culture should be. You're going to have to figure that out on your own, but you need to know what it is. And you need to be able to define it in terms that your people understand and make sense to their experience. And so we picked these 8 culture markers. Okay, you can start with agility and then go clockwise around the circle. It's a magic order called alphabetical. So don't be confused by that. Agility, collaboration, growth, inclusion, innovation, solutions, technologies, and transparency. And I know that if anyone's playing buzzword bingo at home, you all won at the same time. Because we know these words. Innovation is up there, which we're going to talk about. Collaboration, transparency, this is stuff we talk about in organizations. But we didn't just make these up randomly or pick them out of the business literature. This comes from research. All right? Maddie Grant and I wrote Humanize and When Millennials Take Over, which are both books that are fundamentally about the future of work. So When Millennials Take Over, by the way, just for the record, millennials don't get to take over. Sorry millennials. It doesn't work that way. It's a team game. There's always multiple generations in the workplace. We just called it that to scare old people into buying the book. Welcome to Business Book Writing 101, folks. The title is all about marketing. The subtitle, if you can't read that there, is Preparing for the Ridiculously Optimistic Future of Business. Our research was identifying companies in When Millennials Take Over and looking at the literature in Humanize that says, what is the big shift that is happening from traditional management of the 20th century to companies that are doing things radically differently? What is happening in this transition? If we can name it, we can stay ahead of that curve. And so agility, collaboration, growth, technologies, transparency, etc., those all came from this research. But they also came, and I don't know, is Charlie in the room? Did Charlie show up? No, okay. Charlie is our third business partner. Maddie and I and Charlie Judy, because he's from Chicago, so I was hoping he was going to be able to get here today. But Charlie comes from HR. Charlie's spent 20 years in the trenches in organizations actually defining their cultures and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And we put all of that together and really defining how human beings experience the workplace. This is what matters to people. They want to know how agile you are. They want to know how transparent it is in this culture. They want to know this stuff because it impacts their work. And so if you can't tell them what it's like in these terms, then they think culture's a fuzzy thing. Then they don't get it. But when you can articulate it really clearly and say, this is the part we value, hey, on agility, we're actually we're kind of traditional. We don't change very quickly because we don't need to, and here's why. If you can explain that and it makes sense to them, that's cool. But you may say, actually, right now, we got to be all in on innovation, so we are totally focused on this. We're very futurist. We're bleeding edge. You decide where you need to be, but you got to be able to articulate it. Okay? And particularly if you want a culture of innovation. There are a couple of the markers here. Innovation is maybe the obvious one that is important, but we're going to look at transparency. We're going to look at agility. There's a lot in here that you have to figure out if you really want to build a culture of innovation. So we created this model about 2 years ago, and we've been gathering data. So we have, I think we're up to about 25 organizations that have completed our assessments so that we have their data in and can now look at it, doing a little bit of benchmarking, a little bit of how different industries are focusing on things. So It's early days. The data that I'm going to share in a minute has only 20 companies in it. But it's got a bunch of associations, so that's a vertical I'm going to show you. It's got some manufacturing folks. It's got software technology folks. Vendors in the room, sponsors, don't think you're off the hook here. We're going to look at your numbers too. And healthcare. So I got those four. Software, healthcare, associations and nonprofits, and manufacturing. Now my scale, I'm going to ask you to think about how you're going to predict this. My scale is, again, traditionalist to futurist. So if you get really low numbers on the score, it's not bad, but you're like traditional management, command and control, can't change very easily, that kind of stuff. If you get really high numbers, you're a futurist, future of work, you're doing things radically differently, you're all transparent and agile and that kind of stuff, right? So that's the scale. 4 industries, manufacturing, associations, software, and healthcare. Any guesses as to who's at the bottom on this one, folks? Are you nervous now? Did I make you nervous with that question? Who's going to guess? What's the lowest one? Manufacturing is the lowest, not associations. You're like, oh, thank God. Yeah, you guys are the second lowest. All right, here are the numbers. So the gray line is associations. The yellow line is manufacturing. And then those are the 2 lower ones. The 2 higher ones, we got software technology is blue. I think that one's the top overall. And then healthcare is a little bit below that. Healthcare is probably bumped up by the fact that we had one of the case studies in our book who's a healthcare company fill out the survey. So I think they're pushing the numbers up a little. So there you are, associations. Our definition of contemporary is between 5 and 7.5. All of these fall in there. But associations are getting down close to the 5 mark. Surprised, anyone? No? Okay. This is a problem. This is something we need to address. If you want a culture of innovation, you're not going to get there being at the bottom of this curve. Okay? I'm not saying you have to move it up, but I'm saying if you want innovation, you're going to have to shift some of these numbers. So let's look specifically at innovation. You guys were a little bit higher than manufacturing, congratulations, on innovation, but only a little bit. But when you build a culture of innovation, again, if I haven't made this clear, I hope I will, you don't just say we're about innovation. It's more complex than that. You got to dig into the details. So this is actual data from one of our associations that did the assessment. And I picked one on purpose that had a higher score, just so you'd see, hey, look, someone can get almost 7 on innovation here. So this is an association that does innovation pretty well inside their culture. At least that's how people experience it. But notice that it's not just, hey, are we innovative? Yeah, we're innovative, it's cool, we like to innovate. Not specific enough. Future focus. Do you embrace the future or do you hold on to the past? In this organization, they're like, no, we love the future. We get rid of the past. 7.5 on that one. I'll skip permission to hack for a minute. Inspiration. Are we inspired by what we do? Do we do inspirational stuff here? That's a part of what you want if you want people to be focused on innovation. Can we be creative? Do you really value people being creative with stuff? There are plenty of organizations where I don't want you to be creative. I mean, like if you're running the nuclear power plant, let's maybe not hack stuff. Let's keep that a traditional score, right? So you don't have to have high scores here, but we all agreed earlier that we want a culture of innovation. So we need to be focusing on how do we make sure that we value creativity? How do we make this work inspirational? How do we do future focus? This group has kind of figured that out. They're at least doing pretty well in terms of the scale on the score. But I see this pattern a lot, actually, not just in associations. We tend to be pretty good at future focus, inspiration, creativity, because those are the conceptual sides of innovation. Those are the ideas. Hey, let's be creative. Let's inspire each other. Let's focus on the future. Yes, we love innovation. But what's lacking, and you can see here the scores are noticeably lower, is testing new ideas. Do we beta test things? Experimentation. Do we create containers within which people can run experiments? Those numbers tend to be a little bit lower than the idea numbers. So can you actually do stuff? Can you take risks? They're pretty good at risk taking. Is failure okay? You have to build that in. You have to let people do the work of innovation, not just think the ideas of innovation are good. And if those things are out of line, that can really thwart your innovation efforts. Now I said I was going to get back to permission to hack. This is one of my favorite measures. What it basically says is, if you want to hack something, if you want to take a process that's already working and change it, do you get backed up by your manager? Are you supported for that? And in this particular group, they got a 7.2 on that. So I literally, when I was debriefing the data with the management team, I said, can you guys explain something to me? How come you all can hack stuff on a regular basis that's supported, but you can't run an experiment or you can't do beta testing? Like, what's going on? And the CEO saw it immediately. He said, no, that's exactly right with our culture, and this is an issue. Hacking you can do by yourself. You can hack something without telling anybody, and without involving anybody, and without collaborating. But it's harder to run an experiment without connecting to some other people inside the organization. It's harder to actually beta test something without it being more visible and maybe needing some resources. Their challenge, although they were committed to the future, they're committed to innovation, they love these ideas, they hadn't really built the systems and the processes to support them. Okay? The work of building a culture of innovation is not about posters on the wall. It's about how do I actually change the way we do things in order to get the results that I want. And you can't get there unless you can see it at this level. And this is just innovation. I didn't mention this before. You can see on the slide. On agility, manufacturers are more agile than you people. How is that possible? They have factories and machines and assembly lines, but they experience their workplaces more agile than the associations do. That is huge to me. And agility is about change, and innovation is partially about change. So don't just look at your innovation markers inside your culture. What are you doing on agility? Here's some real data from a real association. Managing change. Do we embrace change at the organization? 3.8. That means no, we do not. We do not embrace change. And efficiency at 3.5, that's basically if a process isn't working, we can correct it with ease. At this place, not at all. If a process isn't working, we got to go through procedures, we got to figure it out, we got to cross our T's, we got to dot our I's. And if that's your approach to change, how are you going to do the innovation stuff? So sometimes you got to work on basic efficiency processes and changing directions, and just embracing the idea of change. If you're not supporting that work, the innovation stuff's not going to happen. And then a third marker to look at, which I didn't actually realize initially was going to be connected here, but we're seeing a huge correlation in the data between agility and transparency. I'm not sure why, but wherever your agility score goes, the transparency one kind of follows. And so I thought about this in terms of innovation, and I looked, and this is yet another association, and it's their actual data on transparency. And from a transparency point of view, okay, information credibility is 5.7, so the stuff that we're saying is believable, we've got pretty good trust, we share knowledge, we have a culture where you want to get information from one group to another, that's cool. But look at the very bottom. You heard that I have a degree in conflict resolution, so I always look for this one. 3.7 on managing conflict. So we're fairly good at trust, but when there's conflict, we won't talk to each other. Okay, it's not like you guys, right? This doesn't happen in your organization, right? Okay, so and hard truths is the senior level will be transparent about the tough choices they have to make. So we're okay on transparency, but we're not telling the truth when it gets tough, and we're not dealing with conflict. If you want innovation, if you want a culture of innovation, I'm telling you right now, you are not going to get there with a conflict score of 3.7. Because you know what you have to do to innovate? You want to innovate your annual meeting? You're going to have to go to the person who runs the annual meeting and who has run the annual meeting that way for anywhere between 2 and 317 years. Okay? And it has been successful. And it is part of their professional identity that it's successful. And you have to go to them and say, by the way, there will be no more awards dinner if we're going to innovate. And there will be no, registration fees are going to be completely different, and we will not be hiring the big keynote. Okay, no, hire the keynotes. Sorry. Whatever it is, I'm not a meetings expert, obviously, whatever it is, you're going to have to go to them, and that's not going to be an easy conversation. And if you have a culture where you're not going to do that, where you're not going to have the conflict conversations, then guess what your meeting is going to look like next year? Last year's meeting. Okay? So understanding culture requires that you do a deep dive. You've got to figure out what your culture is at a deep level, not the poster level, but the how do we do things level, and then you're going to have to figure out what to change. Some of that you're going to have to change, either the conflict or how you share information, how you deal with it, the sort of process support for experimentation or that kind of thing. And when you change culture, I get pushback about the definition of culture, like, oh, it's too fuzzy, I don't think we can define it. Once I give them the definition, they're like, okay, that's not bad, I'll live with that. And then I say, oh, by the way, you need to change your culture. Then they're just like, oh, we'll forget that. Culture change, I get two things. One, it's too hard, and two, it takes forever. So I'm going to give you some truth on this. Culture change is hard work. Okay? If you thought it was easy, what were you thinking? This is culture change. But welcome to leadership. Okay? Like this, leadership is hard work. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Culture change is a part of it. So it's going to be hard work, but it doesn't take forever. I was at an association event, association CEO up on stage. She's like, yeah, in my experience, to change a culture, it takes a minimum of 8 years. And so I was reserved at that moment. But had I not been, I would have gotten really mad because it doesn't take 8 years. Now, it may not take 8 days, but you can do, I have seen pretty radical culture transformations in about 12 months. Okay? I've seen it. It's happened. So you can't tell me it doesn't happen. If you want to take longer, you can, but it doesn't have to. And there's actually no mystery about what to do for culture change. You know what you do for culture change? You go into your organization and you change stuff. That's it. All you need is a playbook. This is my metaphor. This is one of my takeaways for you guys. I want that you can go back to your office and start working on. Work on your playbook for culture change. And sorry for the ubiquitous sports metaphor, but so far this one's working for me. What are the plays that are you going to run that are going to shift your culture to be one that is more a culture of innovation? What are you going to do? How are you going to do your hiring differently? How are you going to fire people differently? How are you going to do performance reviews? What processes might you change? What would you change about your technology? This column on the left, rituals and artifacts, stewardship, talent, process, structure, technology, those are the chapters of your playbook, let's say. Those are the sections. And within each one, you can do different things. You want a culture of innovation, and you're a larger association, you may want to invest in the technology that lets people communicate better. Maybe we really need to take our intranet seriously. Maybe we need to build in some other online tools that let people identify new ideas quicker, whatever it is. Something technologically can be done to support a culture of innovation. So run that play. If it doesn't work, scrap it and change it, whatever, but keep running plays. You're going to definitely change the way you do talent. Rituals and artifacts. I put this one up there. You may not like this one. If you want innovation, maybe no one should have an office. Maybe we shouldn't all be behind our closed doors doing work by ourselves. And you're like, oh, no, not the open office argument. Fine, you don't have to have an open office, but I've seen it. American Society for Surgery, they had actually designed an innovation room. They created a room with different colored paint, different design. There's a tree house in this room, okay? And it is designed just to get you thinking differently. That is a play. Someone said, hey, let me work on our artifacts, our tangible culture. Let's change, don't tell me that your culture is about fun and excitement and innovation, and I walk into your office and it's a sea of gray cubicles. Okay, maybe that's a play that you want to run. Maybe you want to change some processes. If you want a culture of innovation, and you only spend money once a year, you do an annual budget process, that's it. Here's your departmental budget, you get this much. And then 6 months in, I'm like, I have this huge opportunity to unlock new value if I could just do X, Y, or Z. I'm like, well, put it in the budget request for 12 months from now. Not going to work. So change your budgeting. Add an innovation budget. Carve $100,000 out of your budget, put it aside, and have people apply for it when they have something that they can do. This is not rocket science. It's a play you can run. And maybe it won't work, maybe you'll adjust it, but run some plays. You should be able to do this. You should be able to figure out what pieces of your organization you would change, and you run them, and then if it doesn't work, you shift them, and then once these are done, you put new plays in. And you keep doing that. And you keep doing that because as you do that, you will shift your culture. You will create new behaviors and new words inside your organization that make it clear what's valued here. What's valued here is that we innovate on a regular basis. Even talent. If you want to innovate on a regular basis, you may need to tell people that their job descriptions might change on a regular basis as well. Like, hey, I want to innovate all the time. Okay, cool, but I want my job description to stay the same every year. That seems a little inconsistent to me. So there's plays to be run in the talent bucket as well. So there's not one way to do it, but start figuring it out. And I'm intentionally leaving some time for question and answers, if that's acceptable. Otherwise, you end up with more time to talk to each other. But I want to finish with a key point that's really a broader leadership message, which is moving forward to be a successful organization at all, let alone an association. I think culture management has to become a thing in this community. Like, we need to do culture management on a regular basis inside our organizations. Do you all do financial management in your organizations? Yes? You got some people that do stuff, like they look at numbers and like if you went into your organization and said, hey, can you show me the expenses from the last 6 months? Someone would give that information to you, and maybe even a little bit of analysis about what it means and what we might want to do differently. Okay, if you go to your same organization and talk to anyone in your organization, you're like, can you tell me how our culture's been shifting in the last 6 months? You get nothing. Can you tell me what we're doing to intentionally align our culture moving forward so that we get better results out of it? Like, nope. Nothing. Because culture management is not a thing inside your organization that needs to be. It's not a full-time job necessarily. It's not something that you do all the time. It's not something that everyone works on all the time. But probably everyone works on it a little bit. And you got some people that work on it more than others. But you got to own this. Culture management is going to be something that you should be doing moving forward. And maybe I'm being overdramatic here, but when I look at the association community and I look at the world and how it's changing, I think it's entirely possible that a fairly large percentage of associations will not be here in 15 or 20 years. They will just fade away and die. And if you don't want to be one of those, you need to be creating an organization where culture and success drivers are tightly aligned and managed on an ongoing basis. So start doing that now. It's not rocket science, but the longer you wait, the farther behind you're going to fall. All right, thank you guys for letting me play today. Any questions so far? And you have a little button to press. Remember, we're recording for the people online. Yes, the way in the back. You raise your hand first.
Jamie,
Yeah.
when you talk about culture management, do you recommend having some kinds of metrics to see how you're moving? The CEO says, you're right, we got to do something about this. How are we going to, and he tells to his executive team, I want you to put together thoughts, and we need to put together a plan. How do you know you're moving forward? And what kind of metrics do you use?
So there's a couple different answers on the metrics. I think you need metrics that are focused on what your culture is, which is what I tend to focus on with organizations. What your culture should be and whether you're getting there is going to be a little softer. It's not like the minute you start managing your culture to the numbers, you've almost lost. You don't want to be focused on moving that score up. I don't like, and there are exceptions to that where you're like, wow, we've been so far behind in innovation, we got to move that number, and so you could actually sort of measure it again, see how you're doing. But mostly what you're going to be measuring is how many new ideas were generated. What new programs did we come up with in the last 6 months? It's going to be very specific metrics that are that's going to be progress related to a particular priority, not a culture metric that you want to move. That makes sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, Jamie. First of all, it's great to have you here today. I've observed and admired yours and Maddie's work for a number of years now.
Thank you.
I think the brat pack of ASAE kids and whatnot, we've all started growing up. I don't know if this is a question or comment, but I think that the challenge to culture of innovation, and I would be interested to hear if your work has explored. It's as if the whole issue is external to us. I think it makes an assumption that we want to be innovative. And I would argue, in my experience in association and being an innovative person, is most people don't want to be innovative. And I think it's a real problem. I don't know, is it the culture of not-for-profit? Is the culture of we attract less risk, we attract more risk-averse people in that? Because I know that in my 18 years in the association world, as an innovator and the king of why everywhere that I would go, I rose quickly and ended up having people waging war against me. Because I literally got taken to lunch one day and got physically threatened to cut out the innovation from a fellow executive who was not wanting to take the risk or rock the boat or shake the boat. And to be quite honest with you, 8 years ago, to be a more innovative association professional, I actually had to lead an association.
Yeah.
And do lots of volunteer work and presentations and take ASE leadership roles and do all of those things. So I guess my question would be, in your body of work or maybe in your future thinking, are we going to analyze the actual professional to see, are we dragging horses to the water, trying to make them drink from the pond of innovation when they don't want to be innovative? They just want to be steady, cautious, and safe.
So, a couple of short answers. I don't know that we actually attract less risk-tolerant people. I mean, I haven't done the research on this, but I bet I could go dig and find some people that are like way more risk-averse than association folks. So I wouldn't give that one. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I don't think that that's a huge piece. I think the biggest piece around innovation, which connects with culture around like whatever you want to focus on your culture, is we're not good at making the case of why. Don't tell me we need to innovate. Tell me why we need to innovate. Tell me why innovation is going to drive results. And so the last chapter of When Millennials Take Over is titled Proceed Until Apprehended. Okay? And it's a quote from Florence Nightingale, who invented the modern hospital as a woman in the 1800s. So that's like a pretty big deal. Her motto was proceed until apprehended. Go do it until someone says, whoa, 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 you can't do that. And if you can do it right, when you proceed, run some experiments, show some results. So when they stop you, they may still be mad that you're the broken innovation record. But when you're like, I know I'm the broken innovation record, but look, we did this experiment, look at these cool results we got. Because people are more willing to change when they see the results. And I think we haven't built that capacity of iterative work, right? Like do a little, get some results, then go from there. We're kind of like, I need to innovate. So let me build a 3-year strategic plan on that. And let's do this, that, and that. In 3 years, I promise it'll work. No, we got to stop doing that. We got to be more iterative. I think we still may have to leave some places. I think I don't drag people kicking and screaming into the 21st century. I go find the people who are ready to go with me. And so we should be willing to do that. But I think there's potential if we can make the why case. Right. One more question, and then we're out of time, maybe? I don't know. You tell me. Go ahead.
So my question has to do with the idea of governance as a critical factor in all of this, because I would agree with you. I think that in many associations, there are staff who really want to move forward, especially today with a lot of young professionals. There's an expectation that they can come and make a difference and they're ready to go. And then they learn about board meetings and the committee process and approval cycles that have nothing to do with the management and the executive staff in the office, but that inevitably drag down the pace of change because of governance. And these boards, because of their rotations and the various ways that leaders come in and out and have different motivations in the nonprofit setting than they do in the corporate setting, I think influence a lot of that. So what have you discovered as far as that connection, and how do we get over that? Okay,
so the question is, how do we get over our boards? And I have 46 seconds to answer that according to my little clock. Actually, it's counting up, so I'm already out of time. But it's a big question. I'll try and be a little bit provocative on this. Number one, your volunteers are part of your workforce. Stop pretending that they're not. They should be held accountable. You should be able to fire them. And you should be very clear, and you should onboard them better and tell them what their expectations are. Okay? Your governance processes are part of your organizational processes. if you decide, it's a decision, I mean, granted, I know that deciding otherwise is a bylaws change, and like, I get it, that's not easy. But if you decide that fundamentally, the people who make the resource decisions make decisions one time a year, then live with it. You don't want that? Change it. But so I've actually worked with an association that ran the genome with their volunteers and said, here's our volunteer culture. Is this what it needs to be to drive our success? And you got to have some pretty forward-looking volunteers to have that conversation. I get it. But if that's not the case, then start educating your volunteers and start finding the smart volunteers that will get it and start bringing them in. But they are part of your workforce. Don't think that they own it. It's their decision. We're just the staff. No, you guys. I get there's a difference between the volunteer workforce and your paid workforce, but it is all a workforce. It all needs to be managed, and it's all part of the culture. Yes.
I was going to say one thing on that. I think both the comments that were made. The thing about ASA,
Press the little button there. It says push.
all right, everyone.
There you
Does that
go.
work?
Yes.
I think the thing, like in the case of ASSH, and I work with Mark Anderson, part of that, and it might be sort of what we experienced, is that you got to have that force of will. And if you haven't met Mark Anderson, he is a force
Yes.
of will. And it could be anybody in that organization that's willing to stand up and say, I'm going to do this, and if I get fired, so be it. I do think that the organizations that I've worked with that are on that innovation curve, have that Steve Jobs like willing to be abrasive, willing to take chances, willing to get fired, and put it out there. And I encourage people to take that risk because it, like you said, otherwise you're just going to be the same. And we know where that's at.
It is not a risk-free path, I will admit. But I will also, and I thank God I'm not an executive director. I would be horrible at this because I would be out there and I wouldn't be patient and they would fire me and then I'd be speaking in front of people. So yeah, I think that happened. But I have worked with executive directors who are better than me at that, and they're subtle. They know their members. If you've got scientist members, then what do you do first? You lead with data. And you start with some data. And deep down, I know the CEO knows that he knows what the data is going to say, and he already knows what the conclusion is, but you show the data, and you have them talk about the data, and analyze the data, and prioritize the data. Scientists, by the way, will take 11 things, and you tell them to prioritize it to 5. They combine them, so that 10 of the 11 get into the priority list. Not that that actually happened. But there are ways to do it that aren't where you're leading it also. There is a little bit of a, I'm going to feed the people that are going to run with this. If you need the right people in place to do that. But there are some other paths. Both of them involve risk, and both of them involve pushing. But sometimes there's the behind-the-scenes kind of push and leading with data, and sometimes there's the kind of, I'm burning the boats, and we're gonna do this. And so it'll vary by the situation. I think other people need to speak, so I better shut up a while. But thank you guys for having me.